Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kupijana Ballabha Girivaradhari Shushodhanandana Bhajajanaranjana Shushodhanandana Bhajajanaranjana Yashodhanandana Bhajajanaranjana Yamunatira Panachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Radha Madhava ki jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai Nitai Gau Pramanande Hari Hari Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutare Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shamni Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyavari Paschatya Satarine. What's the verse? 4, 20,
28,
4, 28, 22. Está bien. Momentito. It's nice to go to countries where people speak English, because I can say more because it doesn't have to be translated. And it's even better in America because the Americans understand my jokes, but you often won't understand. I have to tell a joke, then I have to explain it. And then they go, oh, okay. So, 4th canto, 28th chapter. Purañjana becomes a woman in his next life. And this is text 22. Correct? Correcto? Okay. Evam Kripannaya Bhudya Suchantam Atat Arhanam Grahitum Krita Dir Enam Bhaya Namabhyapadhyata Mabad Evam Kripannaya Bhudya Suchantam Atararhanam Grahitam Kritadirena Bhayanama Bhyapadyata Evam Kripanaya Bhudya Suchantam Atararhana Grahitam Kritadirena Payanamam Bhyapadyata Evam kripanaya buddhya Sochantam atararhanam Grahitam kritadirinam Bhayanamabhyapadyata. Evam kripanaya buddhya Evam kripaya buddhya Sochantam atadharanam Grahitam kritadirinam Bhayanamabhyapadyata.
Evam kripanaya buddhya
Evam kripanaya buddhya Sochantam atadharanam Grahitam kritadirinam Bhayanamabhyapadyata. Thank you. Evam kripanaya buddhya Evam kripanaya buddhya Sochantam atadharanam Grahitam kritadirinam Bhayanamabhyapadyata.
Evam kripanaya buddhya
Evam kripanaya buddhya
Sochantam atadharanam
Sochantam atadharanam
Grahitum kritadirinam
Grahitam kritadirinam
Bhayanamabhyapadyata.
Bhayanamabhyapadyata. Anybody else? Evam kripanaya buddhya Sochantam atadharanam Grahitam kritadirinam Bhayanamabhyapadyata.
Evam kripanaya buddhya
Evam kripanaya buddhya
Sochantam atadharanam
Sochantam atadharanam
Grahitum kritadirenam
Grahitam kritadirinam
Bhayanamabhyapadyata.
So 4:28:22 word meanings. Evam, thus, kripanaya, by miserly, buddhya, intelligence, Sochantam, lamenting, atat arhanam, on which he should have not lamented, grahitum, in order to arrest, kritadi, the determined king of the Yavanas, enam, him, Bhayanama, whose name was fear, Abhyapadyata, came here immediately. So I'm going to read yesterday's verse because this verse refers to yesterday's verse. King Purañjana continued worrying, after I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean. So he was worried about leaving this world because he wouldn't be able to protect his family. Today's verse. Although King Purañjana should not have lamented over the fate of his wife and children, he nonetheless did so due to his miserly intelligence. In the meantime, Yavana-rāja, whose name was fear itself, immediately drew near to arrest him. Purport. Foolish people do not know that every individual soul is responsible for his own actions and reactions in life. In other words, you have your karma. So maybe your fate is really good and I don't like you and I'm trying to make your life miserable, or your fate is really bad and I like you and I'm trying to help you. but your fate will carry out. Your karma is there, despite my best efforts. So Prabhupada's saying, he doesn't have to worry about his children, they have their karma. So even if he's not there to protect him, the karma will indicate. And if he's there to protect him, how can you protect somebody 24/7? It's not possible. As long as a living entity in the form of a child or boy is innocent, it is the duty of the father and mother to lead him into a proper understanding of the values of life. When a child is grown, it should be left up to him to execute the duties of life properly. The parent, after his death, cannot help his child. A father may leave some estate for his children's immediate help, but he should not be overly absorbed in thoughts of how his family will survive after his death. This is the disease of the conditioned soul. Not only does he commit sinful activities for his own sense gratification, but he accumulates great wealth to leave behind so that his children may also gorgeously arrange for sense gratification. In other words, within the context of traditional culture, Vedic culture, when you hit a certain age, you would just detach because you would prepare yourself for your next life or prepare yourself to go back to Krishna. So in Western culture, we generally don't prepare ourselves for the next life. We don't even know if there is a next life, or if we're told, we may not believe. So what do you do at the end of your life? You try to enjoy, right? Isn't it? Whatever, now you're retired, you can play golf every day. Golf started in Scotland, did you know that? Now everyone's addicted all over the world to knocking a ball in a hole. It's amazing, right? Who would have ever thought? In Florida, they have these, retirement communities, and it's all surrounding 1 or 2 golf courses. And they have tennis courts, and they have game rooms where they play cards. So this is how they spend the last days of their life. Same here? Or worse here? Yeah. Maybe it's worse here, right? Because this is the birthplace of golf. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Scotland, yeah. So, in the Vedic context, you understand when we go to school, what do we learn? Did you learn you're not the body, you're a soul? Did you learn that in school? Anybody? Maybe if you went to Catholic school, you might have got close to it, no? Something like that. But so we don't learn why we're here, and we don't learn how to prepare for the next life. All we learn is how to prepare for this life. Because material concept is this is the only life. So if this is the only life, then what do you do at the end of the life? Enjoy as much as you can because you're not working. Just go for it. You had to work for like 30, 40 years. Now you're retired. But in the Vedic concept of life, life is a preparation for self-realization. So especially in the end, when you're not working, that's when you have time and you're getting closer to dying, so that's when you need to be most ready, right? Because they say, it is said in the Vedas, death is the test of life, the consciousness you're in at death. So the whole Vedic culture is meant to prepare us in that later part of life to detach and renounce. So that's what Prabhupada's referring to here. With King Purañjana, it's an analogy, an allegory, but he's playing the part of an ordinary person, and this is what an ordinary person would do. And at the end of their life, they're obviously worried, how will my children live? What will happen to my wife? And so forth. And what we're supposed to be thinking of when we're getting ready to leave this world is not this world and not the people in this world, but we're supposed to be thinking of Krishna and the spiritual world. So he's thinking of his family. That's his meditation. He's leaving the world thinking of his family. Now, this may sound weird to you or funny, but some astrologer told that one man, when he died, because he was very attached to his family, in his next life, he took birth as a dog in the neighborhood. And he would go to that house because that was his house, and he subconsciously remembered, and the people in the house would just, get out, dog, get out, and throw rocks at him, or get a stick. That he was the father of those people who were shooing him away. So, you don't know who we were or anybody was in their last life or where they're going in their future. This morning I was listening to a lecture, and there's a book called the Bhrigu Samhita. And this book is used by astrologers, and Prabhupada said, this book tells you what you were in your last life and what you're going to be in your next life. Isn't that interesting? It's somehow, I don't know how it works, but these astrologers have this book, and everybody's in the book. And they can find you, and they can tell you, yeah, this is who you are now, they know that, this is who you were, and this is who you will be. In your last life, you were a frog in Las Vegas. And you lived outside the MGM Grand Hotel. And there was devotees were going down the street chanting Hare Krishna, and you heard them, and now you're a human being trying to become self-realized. Hare Krishna. Yeah, we don't think these things are true, they are. So, and so the concept of Vedic life is fulfill your desires. Like, we all have so many desires, and ultimately we're meant to become detached. And so, if you can become detached when you're young, that's great. But if you can't become detached when you're young, then fulfill your desires in a way that don't degrade you, so when you're older, you're not thinking about all these things. Oh, I wish I would have done this, I wish I would have had that. You're over that. So when you're 50, 60, 70, that point of your life, you're supposed to be finished. Now you can focus on your Krishna consciousness, right? Preparation. So that's what's being described here. So you might say, well, what's the problem? He's just worried about his kids. Everyone's worried about their kids. The problem is that's what he's thinking of. He's dying right now, and that's where his mind is, and our mind should be. At that point in our life, we should be free from that, right? There's a problem. You get older, then you have kids. You spend 20 odd years taking care of your kids, and then your kids grow up and they go. And you think, okay, now I'm free, but then they have kids. Now you're a grandparent. You go, oh, how can I leave them? So it's not easy just to detach. There's always something to keep you there, right? Yes? Right? Something, whatever. Oh, Google's moving to Scotland. I could get a job and make, 100,000 pounds a year, maybe. I can't leave now. It's too good. I'm a computer programmer, they'll hire me. Yeah. Krishna comes and says, here, I'll take you back to Godhead right now. And what do you say? You say, that sounds good, but there's this movie I wanted to see. It's coming out next week. So would you mind waiting a week? Yes? Yes? Maybe. Who knows? Okay. In any case, everyone is afraid of death, and therefore death is called bhaya, or fear. Although King Purañjana was engaged in thinking of his wife and children, death did not wait for him. Death does not wait for any man. It will immediately carry out its duty. It will immediately carry out its duty. Since death must take away the living entity without hesitation, it is the ultimate God realization of the atheist who spoil their lives thinking of country, society, and relatives to the neglect of God consciousness. So what does Prabhupada mean? In the Gita, Krishna says, I'm time. I'm death personified. You can see God as time. He's the controller of time. So every minute, every second, we're getting older, and at some point, time runs out. All of us, according to our karma, have an expiration date. Maybe your expiration date is 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. But we all have an expiration date. And that expiration date is under the influence of time. Time is controlled by Krishna. So Krishna in the Gita says, Kalosmi, I am that time. So once Srila Prabhupada there was a war in India, between India and Pakistan. And when the Pakistani planes would come over India, they'd have a blackout, so the planes couldn't see anything. They would say, everybody turn your lights out, or put black shades over, or both. And so they'd fly over and it was all black. They didn't know if they were seeing Calcutta or Delhi, or they didn't know because they couldn't see anything. So there's a story that one time there was a blackout and Prabhupada was taking prasadam and he was like, let's finish prasadam. And his friends are, yeah, but the bombs could come, we could be killed. And Prabhupada said, well, we would see or he said this to a reporter, I forget, he said, we see the bombs as Krishna. Krishna's time, death person, God is death personified, so we see God in the form of death. He's come to get me. Completely fearless. Like, yeah, if the bombs are going to drop, what can we do? If we're meant to die, we're meant to die, and it's Krishna, and we see Krishna. So, that's obviously a very elevated way of thinking, but Prabhupada is saying here, the atheists will see God in the form of time when they die. We have a devotee from New York, and his brother, true to spirit, the New York spirit said, when he learned about Krishna consciousness and saw us bowing down, he said, I don't bow down to nobody. Should I say it in a New York accent? I don't bow down to nobody. You got it? You got it? Yeah. So that's... And then Prabhupada said, no, but you will bow down to death. You may not bow down to anyone while you're alive, but you will bow down to death, and that is God coming. You don't believe in God, but you will bow to Him. He will come as death, and you will bow to Him. Even if you're an atheist. You will bow to God in the form of death. Interesting, isn't it? So you can bow down voluntarily, or you can bow down by force, but we will all bow down. Yes? In this verse, the word atad arhanam is very significant, for it means that one should not be overly engaged in welfare activities for one's family members, countrymen, society, and community. None of these will help a person to advance spiritually, unfortunately. In other words, Prabhupada is saying, the highest welfare is to help people spiritually. And if you help someone materially, and you don't help them spiritually, then it's not of ultimate benefit. Unfortunately, in present-day society, so-called educated men have no idea what spiritual progress is. Although they have the opportunity in the human form of life to make spiritual progress, they remain misers. Miser means you hold on to something, you don't spend it. So why does Prabhupada call them misers? Because in the Vedas, they're called misers because they have the value of a human life and they don't use it. They live more like animals than humans. Have you noticed that? Sometimes you see a person's life and it resembles more the life of an animal than a human being. So they have an opportunity to elevate themselves and they don't. So it's considered you've misspent your human life, therefore you're called a miser. One who has wealth and doesn't spend it is a miser, right? Yeah. They use their lives improperly and simply waste them thinking about the material welfare of their relatives, countrymen, society, and so on. One's actual duty is to learn how to conquer death. Lord Krishna states the process of conquering death in Bhagavad Gita. So that's pretty interesting. So go on the street today. Excuse me, sir, what's the goal of life? Obviously, everyone's going to say to conquer death, right? No, no one will say that. Will they? Excuse me, sir, what's your goal? What are they going to say? Get ahead, better position, more money, and so forth. No one's going to say, my goal is to conquer death. If you go to India, yeah. Then it's a little different. Of course, now it's changing. But still, people understand this. That's how they grew up learning this. Lord Krishna states the process of conquering death in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma chame dibyam evam yobeti tattataha taktadeha punarjanma naiti mam eti soarjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. After giving up this body, one who is fully Krishna conscious does not accept another material body, but returns home back to Godhead. Everyone should try to attain this perfection. Unfortunately, instead of doing so, people are absorbed in thoughts of society, friendship, love, and relatives. This Krishna consciousness movement, however, is educating people throughout the world and informing them how to conquer death. Harim bina namrittim taranti. One cannot conquer death without taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then you might be reading this, or listening, thinking, well, what's wrong with taking care of your family? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with it. But Prabhupada's, this analogy is, he's about to die, and he can't take care of him, and he should be taking care of himself. So, there's this concept given in the Isopanishad of something which at first, when I tell you what it is, it's not going to make sense to you. The concept of being envious of yourself. And envious of yourself is described as you do something which is detrimental to your own welfare. You may do it knowingly, you may do it unknowingly. But even if you do it unknowingly, you're still envious of yourself. But definitely if you do it knowingly, you're envious of yourself. So the concept is, you know you should go right, but you go left. And you know that going left will not be good for you. And you know that going right will be good for you, but you go left. So then you say, but how is that envious of yourself? Well, definitely if you go right and it's good for you, that would be self-love, right? So if you go left and it's not self-love, because left is going to harm you, then what is it? Self-hatred? Okay, you could call it self-hatred. But the reason the Vedas call it self-envy is because you know what is good for yourself, and you're not doing it. So it's in some sense, it doesn't make sense that I would be envious of myself, but in some sense we are. Because we're not taking advantage of a situation. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of, a little bit? Yeah. It's a kind of, it's a kind of subconscious self-hatred. That's what it is. I'm acting against my self-interest. So I'm really, indirectly, I'm envious of myself. The word envy in Sanskrit is used differently than we use it. Jai. Koranditai Mayapur Sashi Ki Jai. There they are, everyone. So, conversely, if you do something which is good for your spiritual life, then it would be said you're actually loving yourself. And you may not think, I'm loving myself. I'm chanting Hare Krishna. How is that loving myself? Because chanting Hare Krishna is the best thing you can do for yourself spiritually. So it's an act of self-love, isn't it? Because it's actually helping you. So the word envy in Sanskrit is used to denote doing something which is harmful to yourself. Because otherwise, being envious of yourself doesn't make sense. Like, you're usually envious of someone else because they have something you don't want. So how could you be envious of yourself? Because if you have it, you have it. So it doesn't make sense in the way we use the word envy. But in Sanskrit, the word envy is used as harm. Because in one place in Prabhupada's books, he said, if you eat animals, you're envious of the animals. And I don't want to be a pig in my next life. I'm not envious of a pig. Or I don't want to be a cow, or I don't want to be a dog. So how am I envious? So it's used in that sense of harming. If you do anything to harm another entity, and especially if you do anything to prevent a living entity from evolving further spiritually, you're considered envious of that person. You're harming them. So that's why it's used to be envious of oneself, because we're harming ourselves. Knowingly or unknowingly, I'm harming myself. Just by focusing solely on my material benefit and I'm neglecting my spiritual benefit, ultimately I'm harming myself, especially if I know what I should do. So now it makes sense? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, Prabhupada is not saying material things are not important. He's not saying you don't take care of your family. But he's saying when you come to a certain stage of life, that business should be over. You should put it aside. Your family has their karma. You've worked for them. You've done everything you can. Give them your house, whatever. But at that point, move forward in your spiritual life. That's what this verse is saying. So you have any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
In this purport, Srila Prabhupada indicates that it's a waste of time trying to help your society, countrymen, and humanity at large. You mentioned earlier that all living entities have got their own karma.
Yeah. So if we see somebody suffering, should we just walk by and say, sorry, it's your karma? Is that the question?
No.
That is a good question.
But then you also mentioned that when we get to 50, 60 or 70, then we should close that chapter of our life that was involved in nourishing our society, community and family. Mm-hmm. So what... Well,
if you're married and you have children, that's your responsibility. So you have to make sure that they're dependent on you.
So what about politicians, social workers, people who work for charities who've got like a commitment to society at large?
What should they do when they get older?
Yeah.
No, the same thing. Turn it over to someone else. Yeah. Like with Gandhi. Gandhi was very involved in the liberation of India from British control. And Prabhupada wrote him a letter and said, at this point in your life, you should he said, you believe in Bhagavad Gita, so this is what you should be doing. Because whether India becomes independent or not, ultimately was not dependent on him, and ultimately it doesn't mean India would be any better independent. We don't have control of these things. So Prabhupada said, okay, you've done what you can. Now, in this end of your life, you should be focused on your self-realization and helping other people. So that's an example, right? We could go around blowing up, slaughterhouses. But that's not, but we educate people. You become Krishna conscious, the slaughterhouses will become ghost towns. There's a company called Kodak. They used to make film. They were like back in the day, that was, film. Cameras actually had film. I don't know. Can you imagine that? And film was expensive, and then you had to go develop it and pay more money and then, look at everything and waste paper. So there's a place in New York called Rochester, which is the northwest of New York, and that was the headquarters of Kodak. And when things started going digital, Kodak thought, it'll never catch on. And now if you go to Kodak, it's just a big ghost town. Because the companies that went digital and saw that put Kodak out of business. Who uses film anymore? Does anybody? Unless you're nostalgic and want that 5 millimeter feel, but generally not. So, what was my point?
That the slaughterhouses become like...
Oh yeah. So the slaughterhouses will become like Kodak. When you educate people, and then nobody wants to eat meat, just like nobody wants to shoot with film, then it's not that we don't care about people. It's just that the solution is different. That if you raise consciousness, the other things automatically take care of them. But don't we care about the environment? Of course we care about the environment. But if people weren't consuming so much, there'd be less of a problem. All of a sudden we say, we're not buying this and that. And all these companies that are destroying the Amazon forest to create grazing land for cows, they'll stop because nobody's going to be eating meat anymore, so there's no need. So it's not that we don't care, we just have a different way of doing it. And do we care about our children? Yes. And one of the ways we care about them is to educate them spiritually. That's how we care. So you might care about your kids, so you make sure they go in the best schools so they can become materially successful. But spiritually, they've got no education. So I could say, I care about my kid more than you care about yours because I made sure they got a spiritual education. So I think, it's not that we're insensitive, it's just we have another way of going about getting the result. And you can get a small result. You can focus on a problem. And even that, how much can you do? Right? You do your part, Get an electric car and you don't buy a new computer every year and live simply. You do your part, right? But unless the other 8 billion people do their part, we're going to have problems. But if you can educate them in a way that they do their part, then it's a bigger solution. Yes?
So, especially in Scotland, we've got a government that's really wants to be seen as being like world leaders in progressive community, sustainability, vegetarianism,
Right, that's good.
veganism. So as more and more people kind of come closer to our perception of mode of goodness living, then how do we maintain relationships with them? I mean, at what stage then do we kind of say, well, really our responsibility is to teach you how to elevate yourself spiritually?
Yeah, because ultimately, if people were more spiritually evolved, you wouldn't have to attack problems one by one. Prevention is always better than cure. I was talking to a devotee yesterday, and he's developing corporate courses on stress relief. And I said, why would you want to teach stress relief? You want to teach stress prevention. It's already like it's too late, So, so it's a little bit like that. We will alleviate these problems. But why not just change consciousness so the problems won't be created anymore? Because if I alleviate it, there's new people coming and creating it, right? So, if I can if I can give knowledge to people, that's better. It won't just alleviate the cow slaughter problem, it'll alleviate so many problems. It's because the problems are internal. We're creating the problems as human beings. So if we change, the problems will get solved because we'll stop creating them. You go to the doctor, And he gives you this medicine because you have high blood pressure and it thins your blood. And if you don't take the medicine, your blood pressure goes up. So but you go to a naturopathic doctor, they'll say, well, this and that problem, so change your diet, drink more water, get more exercise, do meditation, so on. And then he doesn't give you any pills. So he's actually curing the problem. So spiritual solutions are like that. And so you solve one material problem, there'll be another one. If you're not healthy, blood pressure is just a symptom of so many other problems. And if I get your blood pressure together, you're still eating the wrong food, you're not exercising, something else is going to go wrong. Then I give you another medicine for that, and you got like 6 bottles every day. That's not the solution. Or it's good for the pharmacies, but not good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the solutions cause more problems than the cures, right? Here's some interesting information. And maybe you could check this out on Google. Chemotherapy is like, it's liquid, right? That's injecting, I never did it, but as far as I know, it's a liquid. They call it a cocktail, right? You get different kinds of chemo for different... And on the bottle of chemo it says, this substance is carcinogenic. Did you know that? I guess it means if you don't have cancer, it'll give it to you. And if you do have cancer, and it's carcinogenic, that's really interesting. But sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. Mm-hmm.
Am I to understand you correctly that you're saying that it's always worth to maintain the dialogue, so that we're changing the content of the dialogue, but we're not separating ourselves from our society, family. We're still giving an opportunity for them to learn from us. You could say we're redefining what welfare means and what care and love means. Let's say in your next life, you have very nice parents, but they don't tell you about Krishna. You won't be happy. I think some of us, when we came to Krishna consciousness and learned so much, we were a little upset with our parents. Like, why didn't you know this? And why didn't you tell me this? You just raised me to be basically an ordinary person who's going to spend their life working to make some money, and you're trying to convince me that's going to make me happy. You should have given me this knowledge. Like, you failed in your duty, right? That's the point. Not that they didn't love us. They fed us meat because they read it was good, at least in my generation, You have to eat meat, otherwise you're going to die. It's one of the main 6 food groups or whatever, 8 or... And so your parents read that and they say, okay, that's, it's like, I wish you never fed that to me. And I spent, 18 years of my first 18 years of my life eating meat. And I wish and I did so many stupid things, and why didn't you tell me this was not going to make me happy? You told me it was going to make me happy. So they loved us, but they didn't know how to love us on a higher level. So the love kind of, it didn't work for us spiritually. Okay, it maintained us materially, but not even necessarily in the best way. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you put yourself in that position and think, okay, in the next life, what would I expect from my parents or from my teachers or from society? What would I like to learn from them? You'd want to learn more than just being vegetarian. That's good. You'd be happy to be raised in a society like that, for sure. But it's not complete, because you want to learn about something more than that. Right? Sometimes
people would interview Prabhupada and said, well, do you have hospitals or do you have food programs? Or why don't you have hospitals? Why don't you have food programs? And he would say that others can do that. That's not our job specifically is to give knowledge. I mean, we have hospitals, we have food programs, but that's not our main function. Our main function is to give knowledge. Because if eventually people become God conscious, there won't be a food problem. Because it'll be distributed. It won't be hoarded. It'll be distributed evenly around the world. Africa can grow food. You can't grow food in the winter, right? Or maybe cabbage or whatever. So it'll be distributed to places they can't grow and to people who need it. You could make political maneuvers to try to do that, but if the world were God conscious, it would automatically happen. So that's Prabhupada's point. That so many problems, you're interested in welfare, but so many of those problems wouldn't exist if the society were God conscious. So if you want to make a solution, it's the best solution. And of course, there would be hospitals and so on and so forth. But his point was that spiritual knowledge is so valuable that that other organizations can do the hospitals and the food distribution. So we want to focus on giving knowledge because that'll be of ultimate benefit. And then, as I said, these other problems would take care of themselves if people were more God conscious. Right? I mean, how much do we waste? How much food do we waste? How much money do we waste? And how much food and money is needed in other parts of the world? Right? So, people who lived a little more simply, they could give and were willing to give more, then we could solve the food problem. I mean, it's so stupid. You have people in one country, they're all fat and overweight, and people in another country, they don't have enough food. And so, from a logical point of view, it's like, okay, maybe those people should eat less, and the less they eat, maybe they should give that to the people who need it. Yeah, a 5-year-old could figure that out, right? But because we lack God consciousness, then the politics of food, the economy of agriculture doesn't allow it. And so here, Mr. Farmer, here's $50,000. Could you just burn all your wheat and rice? Because we have to keep the price up. So that's what's going on. And then someone is, or throwing in the ocean, and then someone in another country, a whole village is starving, and you just threw your grain in the ocean, so you could keep the price up. So you can buy a new car every 3 years. It doesn't make any sense, right? So that's Prabhupada's point. Even a 5 or 10-year-old could figure this out. It's really simple. But in a God-conscious society, it would be executed. And in a materialistic society, it's not. And it doesn't make any sense. How much does the average CEO of a big company make? Anyone want to guess? 20 million or so? At least 5, right? Who needs 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, $100 million a year to live? Nobody. You don't need that much, right? When Nelson Mandela got his first paycheck after his first month in office, he looked at it and he said, this is way more money than I need to live. And he started a charity, and every month, whatever he didn't need to live went to the charity. Now, you hear that and go, wow, that's amazing. That's like perfect. Why doesn't every politician do that? Because they're not Nelson Mandela, and they like money. And, if they give that paycheck, they can't drive a 700 series Mercedes, they have to drive a Toyota. So they can't support their addictive habit for material things. So if there's God consciousness, you would have more political leaders who would be taking salaries of what they need and making sure that everyone in their country is taken care of. Right? And in absence of that, you can go out with your food and feed a few people, but they're going to be hungry tomorrow. And you only have so much food. course, you should feed them, yes, that's good. But it's not the ultimate solution. Right? So I'm not saying you walk on the street, someone's hungry, and you go, too bad, your karma, and it's a bad government, and so, it's just too bad. No, we don't, on an emotional level, we don't feel that way. But more on an intellectual level, we see the picture differently. So I'm not saying be insensitive and you don't care about your family and your kids and society. We do care, but we don't see it as the best way to help. Especially in the later, and this purport was all talking, the other thing, it was talking about the end of life. It wasn't talking about when you're 20. It was talking about when you're 60, 70 and you're ready to die. Where's your mind? What are you thinking about? All the things you're not going to be able to do much about after you die, and you're thinking how I can set it up. No, you should be thinking now, Krishna. Right? So this is also the context of this. So the question you asked doesn't entirely relate to this context. Because to answer your question and say, in this context, forget it all. Whatever you were doing, just, now focus on your spiritual life. This is what you prepared your whole life for. So now focus on it, right? When you're on the airplane and the announcement, all the engines have turned off, we're going to die in about 3 minutes. And you want to see, can I hook up to the internet and call my wife and tell her? No, at that point, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, everything's turned off, right? But most people will be trying to contact their loved ones, right? So when it comes time to leaving your body, you want to be in samadhi, Krishna conscious samadhi. Yes?
We made a point in class that if you stop the average person on the street and ask him what his goal of life is, he's not going to say to conquer death. And that is as a result of the educational system. But if you asked a classroom of 5-year-old kids, what's the goal of life? And some of them, maybe I remember when I was really obsessed with death.
Really?
But by the time they come out of the educational system, it's been beaten out of them. So maybe that's part of the solution to catch them when they're young, when they get wiped off by the system.
Yeah, it's true. Some things don't make sense to us because we've been programmed to think in a certain way. It would have made sense to us at a younger age. That may be true. But you're special. So you were thinking about those things when you were young because you were thinking about them in your last life. And so you came into this life thinking about them. But, yes. It is true. We've been programmed in specific ways which are meant to aid the economy. So if we work hard and make a lot of money and spend it, then the economy will grow. And don't think too much. Somebody said, I think it was Henry Ford or something, he said, it's a good thing if people are in ignorance, because if they weren't, there would immediately be a revolution. If they actually knew what was going on, everyone in the world would revolt. How the banks are cheating and how the corporate is, this and that, and big pharma, this and that. And I don't know about your country, but in just a simple example, a couple of simple examples. There's only 3 protocols for curing cancer, and all other protocols are illegal. To cut it, radiate it, or use chemotherapy. A doctor cannot legally treat cancer any other way, or he'll lose his license. Even though he could cure it. And even though the other ways may not cure it, or cannot cure it, and he has a protocol that could cure it, in America, it's illegal. Did you know that? That's just one thing I could tell you. Right? So, you want to hear more? One more thing. This is really interesting. This will be interesting for you. I don't know if you're aware of this, but all the archaeological discoveries that have been made and printed in scientific literature that's available for anyone who wants to spend the time. If you put them all together, there's no support for evolutionary theory. In fact, it undermines evolutionary theory over and over again. Did you know that? Okay, that's point one. There are discoveries of human-like skulls or human-like objects that would demonstrate that these people were not cavemen, but pretty evolved as we are. In strata of the earth that's way older than there are supposed to be intelligent human beings. And there's lots and lots of it. But if you discover that now, and 150 years ago it wasn't a problem because everybody wasn't so, evolution wasn't like the default absolute truth. But now it is. And so if you were a professor and you found something and you published it, you would lose your job. So there's actual story of a lady who discovered something in strata like 10 million years, and here's like a skull or some pot or something that shows that these were pretty cultured human beings, intelligent. And she was told, do not publish this. By many, many people told her, do not publish this. And she published it and she lost her job as a professor. That's just one example. So there is a thinking that they want us to think. There's a belief system they want us to believe in, and it's being controlled. And if you step out of line, you're in trouble. You ever read these stories where so-and-so was promoting something or revealing some truth, and so-and-so mysteriously disappeared and nobody knows what happened? Do you ever hear those stories? Hello? Why did so-and-so mysteriously disappear? Because so-and-so knew something that we're not supposed to know and was about to tell it, or was starting to tell it. Did you know that? Yeah, So when you understand these things, that you realize that the value of knowledge, there's nothing more valuable than knowledge, to break that illusion. Otherwise, we're all just the whole world's just going to work hard in the pursuit of happiness that they never really achieve, and die in ignorance, and come back in another body, maybe not even a human body. So, okay, I'll describe a really depressing situation. Now we understand that according to your consciousness and your spiritual evolution, it determines your next life. So where my mother-in-law lives, mother and father-in-law, they live in a basically over 50, over 55 community, but most people are more like high 70s and 80s that live there. And so we visit them, and one day I was walking by the card table, and there's all these guys in their 80s, gray hair, and they're playing cards. And I was thinking, for us, cultivating spiritual life, that's not what we do at the end of our life, unless the cards are Bhagavad Gita cards, with shlokas, right? And we're becoming self-realized by playing cards. But we're very focused on our spiritual life. So I was thinking, I'm seeing, okay, this is the end of their life. You don't even know if all of them are going to be playing cards tomorrow. They're at that point when you just don't know if they're going to wake up the next day. And they're probably playing bridge. And that's how they're ending their life. And I thought, America, the so-called greatest country in the world, this is what has produced. It's produced that this is how you leave your body, playing cards. Whereas in the Bhagavatam and the Vedas, it's all about how to leave your body in God consciousness. The whole thing is to get you to this point when you're in the end of your life, you're as high as possible spiritually, so you can evolve out of this world. And here, the culmination of material civilization is golf, tennis, and bridge before you die. And lots of those people have become atheists in the last, just all Jewish community, lots of them have become atheists. So atheism is become really popular amongst Jewish people, and they have books like Letting Go of God and things like that. So that's like insult to injury, right? You've let go of God at the end of life because you're so smart. And you're going to spend your last days playing golf, tennis, and bridge, and going out to dinner a few nights a week. We don't want to be born in our next life, but if we are, we don't want to be born in that situation. And my wife, she's the daughter, and when she was 5, she became a vegetarian. And she said, I never fit in that family. I never felt like I was part of that family. I felt like, and her mother used to say, you're like from a different universe. So, if you're evolving spiritually and you're born in that situation in your next life, you won't even be able to relate to it. She's 5 years old, I'm not going to eat meat. And then 16, started doing yoga, and it's like, and she said, and she always wanted to go to religious events, and her parents didn't. Her parents would never go to temples, so she would go to just walk down the street, go into a church. She was inclined like that. And her parents never fostered it. So it's like, you want to be born in that situation? Not so good. Nice parents, take care of you, everything. But in terms of knowledge, not much, or nothing. Material knowledge, yes, not spiritual. Is that okay? So knowledge is important. Therefore, in ancient society in India, there was a class of men who just gave knowledge. They didn't open hospitals, they didn't feed people. Other people did that, and they gave knowledge. That's what they did. And they advised all the other people. So that's the idea. Is that okay? Krishna Karshani says, but if your family members are devotees, then thinking of them at the time of death is good. Depends how you think of them. Better think of Guru and Krishna and have faith. You know the story. The story of I forget how it goes, something like this man, he was thinking, should I take sannyas? Should I renounce? But he's thinking, I have this family. And then one day he goes out and he sees a little chick, a little baby bird, and a worm just fell in its mouth, like off a branch of a tree, and just fell in its mouth. And he said, everyone has their food allotted to them karmically, so, my family will be okay. If it's their karma, they'll live with me or without me. So, it's not to say everyone, men should leave their family, but he was at that point in his life where he was capable of dedicating himself spiritually. And so, he saw that and he took that as a sign. It's just an idea. Not that I'm telling you to renounce. Yes?
So when you were talking about the Brahmins there who didn't open hospitals or run the schools, but they gave advice. So if that channel of giving advice is not there in the particular country that we live in, so whose duty is it to create those channels?
Us.
To give advice?
Us. We try to help people as much as we can. And the government should do it. That would be best, but in lieu of that, we have to do what we can. Distribute books. Give people a chance. There's a lot of ignorance in the world. There's a lot of good people who are ignorant. They don't know. It's not that they're doing things wrong deliberately, they just don't know there's a better way to do it. Right? They're just innocent. They don't know. No one's showed them. So that's our job. Right? At one point, we were all ignorant. We didn't know. So we were doing what all our friends did, right? Isn't it? Which is what all your friends do. Get in the car on Friday night and drive around and try to figure out what to do. And do that on Saturday night. And, recoup on Sunday morning. Recover, you know. So, you know, we didn't know anything else. So we, at least if you give someone knowledge, they have an opportunity to look at things differently. You can't force it, but at least you've done what you can do. Right? Is that what you did on Friday night? Drive around? Trying to figure out what to do? Because you've already done it 100 times and it wasn't so great. I grew up in Los Angeles, so we would drive in Hollywood. That was, when I grew up, that was like Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood. That was the place. I would drive up and down. And in Friday, Saturday night, it was just packed of people just driving up and down with nothing to do. Just kind of like feeling important or something, I don't know. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Grace Mahatma Prabhu ki jai.
Gauranga Nityananda.